Welcome to the Untold Science Women in STEM podcast series. This series is an initiative to foster gender inclusivity in science, regionally and worldwide. It's to bring inspiring talks and conversations with pioneering women who have significantly contributed to the world of science. Today, I'm excited to introduce our guest, Dr. Azam Gholami, an associate professor at NYU Abu Dhabi. Azam is a leading expert in biophysics with groundbreaking research in areas such as cell motility, biological and chemical pattern formation, and the fascinating dynamics of microswimmers. Her work has significantly advanced our understanding of these complex systems. We are thrilled to have her with us today to share her insights and experiences. Welcome, Azam, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
I would like to start with a report from the National Science Foundation published in 2020, where it's mentioned that in the US, women make up nearly 50% of life scientists, but only 29% are represented in the physical sciences. Similar example is in Italy, where 47% of biology professors are women, while only 17% are physicists. Can you share with us your perspective on the current status of women in science, particularly in this field? And why do you think we have this relatively low percent in this field?
Yeah, this is a really good question, and I can answer this question based on my own experience as I entered into the university doing my bachelor studies in physics. I'm originally from Iran, and up to my master studies, I finished everything in Iran. And actually, the personal reason that myself selected physics was the inspiring interactions that I had with my physics teacher at the high school level. So at that time in Iran, actually, I was considered to be a good student at the high school. And the common practice was that most of the students that they were good in the high school usually selected to go to the engineering or computer science because you had a better job market. So that was like the common thing that you used to hear, that you have to go to computer science or engineering or medical school. So definitely I didn't want to go to the medical school. So I started, studying math and physics in high school. But the inspiring interactions that we had with our high school teacher at the end, high school teacher that we had in physics, at the end convinced three of us. So this means myself and two other close friends that I had in the high school to start studying physics at the Sharif University in Tehran. And maybe you don't believe me, when we entered to the university, actually more than 50% of the class were females. More than, I would say around 60% we were female students. And then as you mentioned, and I think this trend is very common among different countries, is that you start with a high percentage of women, and then as you go to the higher levels like master, PhD, it starts to drop. And I think it's not also hard to understand why. And this has to do a lot with cultural responsibilities and also, expectations as you start building a family, that you give priority to your family. So after, it was also the case, still is the case also in Iran, that after the bachelor, you start seeing that women leave science. And for physics, especially, maybe is even more because, first of all, it's a kind of a challenging field, maybe. Mm-hmm. And most of my friends that I had during my bachelor studies, they went and became a physics teacher. So they were mostly satisfied with that level. And then when I started my master, already at that level, you could see that the number of male students is more, and PhD, even the number dropped further, and you had less and less female PhD students. So at least since I'm grown up in Iran, and I think it's very similar culture also here in Middle East, and possibly everywhere else, is that as a woman, you give priorities to family responsibilities and make sacrifices. And this happens, I think, even more in traditional countries like Iran or Middle East. This is one important factor. But yeah,
I would actually ask you what motivated you even to go to STEM fields and study physics.
Yes. So in the Iran's school system, usually when you go to the high school, already at that level, you have to decide if you want to go to like medical and biological sciences, or you do math and physics, and then you continue in that direction. So in that selection, I decided for math and physics. And the main reason was like, I didn't want to be a medical doctor. I don't know. I was like scared of seeing blood and these kind of things, right? That you have in mind
Yeah.
back then. So that motivated me that already at that age, which is kind of actually an important decision, which happens at an early age, right? So it's not, you are not really mature at that point to make a good decision. That's why mentoring is really important. And I should say back then we didn't really have mentors. I mean, my parents were happy as long as we had good grades in the school. So nobody was asking us, do you like
Or you
physics more
dislike.
or physics, mathematics? So it was not like that. We were like self-motivated. And as long as we were bringing home good grades, they were happy with us. And I was a good student, but I knew I didn't want to do medical, like I didn't want to go to the medical school. So that's pushed me in that direction. And I never regret, of course, that one.
Were there any notable achievements by women in science that also participated in your direction?
I think especially recently, the achievements have been really great. So it's not like very focused on biophysics, but I think all of you have heard about the Nobel Prize that actually two women from biology field got the Nobel Prize for the great work that they did for CRISPR and gene editing. I think everybody knows about this. Also, like again, I think everybody knows about the great achievements during Corona time that for Moderna vaccine, and I think also AstraZeneca, the lead scientists they were like women, and that's I think already a great achievement. And also, I think every day we hear about achievements by women also in the physics. I know about recent Nobel Prize that was shared between a female and male scientists. She worked on the black hole, so it was like a physics Nobel Prize. So I think the achievements are really huge and is like proud for all of us as a women. So I think what I can also see comparing like my times with because I can compare how I was thinking back then in the high school or at the university and compare to the way that young generation are thinking as I'm interacting with them, in the class here at NYU. You see that they are much, much more advanced than us. I mean, I'm comparing to myself, right? I'm comparing how naive I was when I was in
I
bachelor
won't say
back,
naive.
but
I would say I would say
I don't know. I feel we are
لا,
like
but it's because we did not have the same resources. We did not have the same. يعني I think they are privileged, and I wish that they can utilize
yeah,
this opportunity.
exactly. That's why I think even if you wait like 10 years, you will see much, much bigger achievements. I mean, now we are
Yeah.
talking about women that they will do. I mean, I see the women in my class here at NYU, and I see they are really mature, and this generation can do much, much better than what we did. So they shouldn't actually look at us as their, as their, what is forebuild, as like their example. They have to do better than us. And I think they will do
لا,
because I see
here
that.
I would say that they should look at you as an example because you navigated through different challenges to become where you are.
Exactly.
But they have better opportunity to do even more.
Sure.
Uh,
Exactly.
it's very interesting.
That's why I'm
Yeah.
sure they will do better.
Yeah.
I'm sure
Yeah.
about this.
You mentioned that you were inspired by biologists. How did you end up in physics, though?
So my first inspiration was from a physics teacher. So that was my physics teacher back in the high school. And as I said, back then in Iran, it was not like recommended for us to go doing physics or math because they said you end up having no job. The best that you can do would be like becoming a physics teacher or math teacher. We were told us like all the time. But this teacher, I think that's why mentors are really important that motivated us to start studying physics at the university. So this was like my bachelor level and master. I both did physics, but in my time, at least at the universities that I was studying, we didn't have any biophysics. I mean, it was more like everybody was more focused on solid state physics. So that's why up to my master studies, I did solid state physics. But then when we were looking together with my husband, looking for a PhD position in Europe, and we wanted, again, that's why I'm saying we were naive back then. So at that time, my priority with my husband was to get a PhD position, but at the same city. And when we got the position, actually, I was lucky to end up doing my PhD in a very nice group with a very nice biophysicist. So that's why when we found a job at the same city, and it happened to be biophysics, I was so happy that we got that job both in the same city. But now I'm happy that that happened by this. I mean, it happened, and I don't regret that. So that's why.
Yeah, this is, I think, the most important thing, that you don't regret.
I don't regret, exactly. And now even I encourage my students to do biophysics.
Actually, you increase the percent of physicists then, so we should be happy, and because this, yeah, you see. Research shows that the underrepresentation of women in science can be influenced by factors like gender stereotype, lack of mentoring, as you mentioned before, and the pressure to balance family responsibilities. What specific challenges have you encountered as a woman in science, and how did you overcome them? I mean, one example that you had to find, it's what you mentioned now, that you had to be a little bit flexible about the subject you will study, just to make sure that you maintain, let's say, the family unity, that you and your husband study in the same place. What other examples do you have?
Yes, so again, I talk about from my side with my experience. So when we moved to Germany so that we can start both the PhD at the same city. So first of all, I say that the fact that I entered in the field of biophysics was by, I would say, accident. But of course, at the end, you shouldn't do a field or a topic that you hate, right? So that's also important because you will suffer all the way to the end of your life. But I knew that I'm not hating biophysics. That's important. So I was not back then in love with biophysics, but I was not also hating that. But over time, as you grow and as you learn your project and your project make progress, then you see, oh, I like this. And something that at least it happened to me was like nobody actually introduced me in some sense during my bachelor or master studies into the field of biophysics. So I would say I didn't have any mentor telling me, okay, if you enter this field, you will do this and that. If you go to solid state, you will. I mean, solid state was much better introduced in Iran, at least. So that's why I kind of entered the field by accident, but I don't regret. And then again, I think I was also lucky to have I should say this, I had a very supportive husband. So I can tell you because in the second year of my PhD, I had my daughter. So our daughter was born. And if I didn't have a supportive husband, that was the point that you can easily stop, because as a woman, of course, you give priority to your child and to your family. So I think a lot of factors come into the play, when you want to be successful. Again, I don't call myself successful, but I could manage, to find my way. And I should appreciate, honestly, the role of my husband, because he was very supportive. So at that time, until my daughter became 1 year old, we were like making half a day I was working and half a day he was working until she could go to the, to the kindergarten. So again, if I had a nasty husband, that would have been the point that I should have stopped. And also this like this support continued all over, right? I finished my PhD, then for the postdoc, also for example, we were in Germany for 20 years, right? The fact that we left everything and we came to Abu Dhabi was also a big move for us. And if my husband was not supportive, I wouldn't have been here. So it's very important.
Okay, so let's say that you sacrificed in the beginning of your education, let's say to do biophysics, that you and your husband get Stella or the position in the same place, but he returned it sort of to you by sacrificing and going with you.
Exactly.
Actually, but this is great. This is what family support is about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Why do you think there is a still significant underrepresentation of women in senior scientific roles? You mentioned before about an early stage, but now we are talking also even about the senior. Let's say that you have master, you have even PhD. What happens after the PhD?
Yeah, I think there are several challenges. Sometimes you are a really qualified woman, but the society kind of doesn't accept you in that sense. So let's say two qualified person, one female, one male, they are not treated equally. And this especially, I think, happens a lot. I would say I have experienced that in my own country, in Iran. I was for a long time living in Germany, so it's not like that is perfect there. Is the situation is better, but still you can see this kind of discriminations that as a woman you are not accepted as with the same qualification, you are not in the same situation. Also, like the payment, sometimes there are gaps in the payments with the same qualification. You get different payments. I would say this is even true in Europe, which are still, they are very advanced, but still is not everything balanced.
I always ask myself this question. Is it because men are good negotiator and we are not?
I think that has some effect. So sometimes I have also seen this among my students. So I have, let's say, a female student that is really good when you start, talking to her, but she is a bit shy maybe to show that outside. But then you see, opposite, that there are people that they are not really deep in knowledge, but they show that in a way as they are.
They can market for themselves, I can
some
do.
people are,
And
this can be actually both male and female, but I would say that female are not as good as men showing themselves or, create a market in a sense that I'm really a good scientist. And
maybe this is a skill to be acquired, a workshop.
Exactly.
Or like
From the childhood that yeah, but that's really true. And also I think something that needs a maybe cultural and a long-term training is also one needs to train boys, right? So that you respect, especially again, I go back to Iran, especially our own kind of typical countries with we have similar cultures, right?
Yeah.
That they are trained from childhood to respect,
yes,
the females and to respect and they accept their capabilities. This is sometimes a problem that I see needs a long-term planning, long-term education.
Do you see that the cultural and regional, since you studied in Germany and in Iran, so you notice the cultural and regional differences and their impact on the women participation?
Yes, I think the cultural differences are very important. But again, I'm just comparing between Iran and Germany. Even though that Germany is like a developed country, you also see there that when it comes to traditions, sometimes they are also very traditional. Like, for example, when you have your baby, that's, there are a lot of international kind of way that people think about women. When there is a baby coming, that's your priority, which makes sense, right? So, but for example, you see a lot of common points, the common ways that people think about traditional responsibilities of a woman. So even though that you maybe think, oh, Germany is very developed, but then when it comes to small things, you see that there are a lot of, common things between what I experienced in Iran my experience in Germany. But at the end, of course, they are doing much better, right? So one can learn a lot of lessons from them. So, yeah.
So in science, diverse teams have been shown to enhance the quality of research by bringing in a wide range of perspectives. And since you've been to Germany, Iran, and now here, I would assume you have been working in diverse teams.
Mm-hmm.
In your opinion, why do you think diversity is important in scientific research?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of scientific projects that is really important that you have both male and female on your team, because they look at that one from different perspective. For example, just I haven't been in the field of like drug treatment, this kind of studies that they look at effect of drugs on human. When you have like all male in your team, they will not maybe come up with the idea that this drug shouldn't only be tested on males, but you should, have a diverse pool of candidates to test. I think this kind of things that look like very, maybe in the first glance they don't look like very important, but at the end they are really important. That when you are like looking at a research project, especially for some projects this is more relevant, like the example that I told you for the drug treatment, it's important that you consider both male and female, right? So you don't only select the male candidates for testing that one. And also, what I have experienced in my own research is that for the same problem, let's say the same scientific question, male and female tackle that problem very differently. And this is a good thing to have. I think women have a completely different way of solving a problem than male. And I don't want to say which one is better, but it's good to have both together, so not to isolate one.
They have opinion number one, we have opinion number two. While discussing, we have opinion number three as a result.
Yeah, exactly.
So I would guess it will improve things.
Yeah, definitely.
Studies indicated that addressing gender inequality in STEM requires structural changes and supportive programs. As you mentioned a while ago, mentorship is very important, advocacy, and creative, inclusive environments. These can be considered as key elements that help women to advance in male-dominated fields. My question actually to you, if you are aware of strategies or initiatives that you believe are critical for increasing women contribution to science, whether regionally, at the regional level, or globally even.
Again, I tell you about my experience back in Germany, and I think similar activities are also here.
Yes.
So when I was in Germany at the Max Planck Institute, they had a day, maybe you also experienced this, that they bring the kids from the elementary school. So they called that Girl Day, something like this. Mm-hmm. So they brought the girls. Of course, later they combined, so all the kids could come, because that makes also sense. So everybody could come one day to the Max Planck. And then different research groups, they had like simple experiments showing them, like they could also do some very small experiments, just, you wanted to expose these kids to the basic science type of research, because when they come to the high school level, they repeat this type of program so that before entering the university, maybe they have an idea of what do they want to do in future, or at least what do they want to study at the university. I think these type of activities are super important to expose the kids already when they are very young, already at the age of the elementary school. So they come to the lab, they get an impression, maybe it will not be a deep impression, but still they visually see that as a scientist or as a, physicist or biophysicist, what do you do, how your daily life looks like, right? So I think these kind of education are very important.
To encourage them.
Yeah. So as I said, in my time, we didn't have these possibilities. Nobody basically cared if I want to do physics, biology. Nobody was like training us.
At that time, it was like, what was your grade? It was more about what was your grade in the school. So it can qualify you to what you will study. And it's not like, the question was never like, what do you want to study? It was like, what was your grade?
Exactly. It was like, do you bring good grades home? Then my parents were
Yeah,
happy.
and
As long as I was
yes,
a
yes,
good
yes.
student,
And
they
if you
were
had a
happy.
great, let's say, grades that qualify you to medicine, there is no chance that you go to something like, oh, I want to study biology. No, haram.
Exactly. They want you to push to medicine.
Yeah, medicine. I think mainly in this
Yeah.
region, medicine and engineering. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm happy that my parents at least didn't push me to study medicine. Well, I mean, you never know, maybe that would have been good, but they didn't push me. As long as I was a good student, having good grades, I could select myself what do I want to study at the university. And that was, I think, good for me.
Yeah.
So,
So it went in the right path after all.
Yeah. I hope.
Talking about mentorship, how do you see your role in mentoring and supporting the next generation of women scientists?
Based on my experience, I will be very happy to involve to, for example, school activities. I mean, if they tell me that if I could organize, for example, events that kids from the school, already even at the elementary school level, they could come and visit, for example, NYUAD, I will be very happy to prepare very tiny experiments just to show them the micro swimmers that we work. Already for small kids, I think it's very inspiring to see how small organisms that we don't see with eyes, how do they look like under the microscope? How do they swim? These kind of activities from the early ages, I think, can, build curiosity for these kids that maybe later they try to study physics, biology. So, this fundamental science, and not everybody needs to be, a medical doctor. So I will be personally very happy if there are of course, I can also initiate this type of activities myself, right? So one shouldn't wait until these type of organizations are there and you say, okay, I participate. In principle, one...
Actually, there are lots of opportunities around, and once you can participate, I think there is an upcoming something the university is preparing, Open Campus Day.
Open Campus, exactly.
Yes. We would be happy to include you in because we receive lots of requests from schools to come and visit labs. So it's great to know that you are willing to do this kind of outreach activities.
Sure. Yeah, I will be happy because I think this is also part of our responsibilities, right? If we want to change something, at the end, you have to start from yourself to participate, even though that will be small.
As we look to the future, structural changes we said needed, and it's a key to advance the gender equity. What are your hopes for the future women in science?
I think my hope is that we will reach to a point that we don't need to discuss if we have enough women in STEM or do we need to do something to increase. So I think in an ideal situation, the balance should come automatically so that you don't discuss about gender equality or we need to worry about now encourage more women to come. If the work that we do is correct, or if you prepare the younger generation early on, I think this will automatically happen. Of course, you need also to provide the right support, right? When you talk about family responsibilities, these kind of issues that could cause the women to drop from science, then you need to provide the support in terms of, childcare, in terms of also educating the men that they can participate in family responsibilities. These things need a long-term education. And I hope that we will have a day or a time that I think it will come because the women are doing great. I see that. So the women are really very confident. They know what do they want. And this will come. And also as mothers, we will educate our child, right? You need to educate also the boys to accept the capabilities.
To be supportive.
To be supportive, exactly. That's something that comes not overnight, but it's like by education and it takes years, but it can happen. So it's all up to us, Rina.
Yeah. Finally, I would like to ask you, what advice would you give young women aspiring to enter scientific fields, especially in your field, biophysics?
Maybe my main advice would be like not to be afraid of things that you don't know. Now in NYU, I'm teaching the course on Foundation of Science, and I see that there are students, or at least physics students, that seems to hate biology, and that's why automatically they cross out biophysics. So they say they like physics but they don't like biology. That's why they say, okay, we are not going to do biophysics. But actually when you enter into the research, you see that you will learn part of the biology that you need, right? So let's say when you are doing a biophysics project, you don't need to go and memorize a book, right? That doesn't mean that's not needed for your project. So you just learn as much as you really need to understand your project. And even as a person, if you don't like biology, you can still do biophysics. So this is, let's say, for my own field. But the general recommendation will be like, if you like something, you can pursue that. And yes, and that would be, I think the success will come if you are interested and you have the energy and you spend time.
Yeah. I am very interested to ask you this question. What is your advice for you like 20 years ago?
20 years ago, you mean what I could do differently 20 years ago somehow?
Yes, if you would give advice for your younger self.
Yeah, that's a good question. If I could go back in time, maybe I would have been a bit more confident. So what happened to me is that at the beginning, I didn't really have enough confidence in myself. So it was something that came over time. So I hope, or I wish 20 years ago, I was more confident, maybe more pushy on the things that I wanted in terms of my research projects. But that's also, I should accept, is something that comes over time. You know, as you're doing your research and you find some nice results, then that also beats more confident on your research. But maybe 20 years ago, if I had a bit more confidence, I was not like shy or so, then would have been better. So, but again, I think the new generation is more confident than myself 20 years ago. So,
But see, it's still an achievement. Though you say you were shy, but here you are.
yes, I still over time I could build that. Yes.
Azam, thank you for sharing your insight
Thank you.
and experiences with us. It was a pleasure to host
Thank you so much for having me.
To our listeners, thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and join us in the Untold Science Women in STEM. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.